to worry about it, although it is worth mentioning that Sanguine Depths does show up guaranteed in our cup finals, so these teams will have better spent a lot of time practicing and honing that extremely difficult dungeon. We're going to start off, though, with this Theater of Pain, and like Nagura said, Piami really blew our expectations away here with a fantastic victory over Echo. It was very surprising that they were able to pull that off even with more deaths than Echo had in that run. So they really have a good strategy for this dungeon. I'm curious to see, though, what Perplexed has in store for us here. We haven't yet seen that as we're about to get underway.
All right, so it looks like Piami is playing with that Moonkin here, while Perplexed chose to run the Disc Priest and the Windwalker and the Hunter as well. This is something we've seen by Gargoyle's stream as well, so they did not switch to that new Paladin comp that we've seen lots of other people switch to in almost every single dungeon. Perplexed says, you know what, we're going to stick to our Priest comp for Theater of Pain. It's not worth it to switch to the Paladin. So interesting to see that Perplexed is not adapting to this meta. Of course, it's really hard for these kind of MDI teams to switch their meta once the tournament has already started, because if they have practiced with this comp and then afterwards they saw, oh, Piami actually has a faster time than us, then it's going to be too late for them to actually switch it around. It's requiring too much practice for them to switch out their whole comp mid-tournament.
Yeah, there's some really nice things that the Perplexed comp just gives you in this dungeon. Notably, you don't have to play any weird Necrolord stuff. You don't have to do like a Vengeance Demon Hunter Necrolord, which can be difficult to learn, and which has a lot less utility against Necrotic. You don't have that Kyrian file that Divine has to just clear Necrotic, which is extremely powerful. So given that, it's really, this is a dungeon where it's really compelling to say, you know what, I'm just going to stick with that Discipline Priest. I'm going to stick with the Hunter, with the Windwalker. Those are a lot of specs that have kind of been falling out of favor over time during the MDI. If I had to guess, though, I would say I like Piami's position, given now that we've seen these team comps, because it's just like their last time in Theater, right? They had this comp and they just, blasted extra damage with it. And I expect that we're going to see something similar out of them. Both teams really fast on that first boss, although Piami, if you look at the boss 1 split, they gained 5 seconds. And I think that a lot of that has to do with the fact their composition is just going to be higher damage as a result of that Holy Paladin.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Just a single target damage, which matters a lot in Theater of Pain. So many bosses, so many mini-bosses. Their Divine Field actually dropping incredibly low. As they're gathered up all of these Shackled Souls. Yeah, he's also procced as well. So this is a little bit of an issue for Perplexed. As clicks goes down for Piami, he did have that Shadow debuff on him, that curse that increases the damage taken from the Portal Guardian's AoE. He looks like he did get Battle Rest by Eagle there in the back, so they didn't lose too much time from this, but it's still not something you want to see if you're playing against Perplexed.
Yeah, Divine was under a lot of danger there. He had like 40 stacks of Necrotic and was at sub 20% health, but they have done a great job of kiting that out and surviving. Divine is one of these tank players where you just watch him and you just wonder how he doesn't die, and he looks so dead for like 30 seconds in a row, and somehow he's able to survive it every single time. It is really rough for him, though, that cheat death was used during the grouping up of those Shackled Souls. That's a really important resource that he's going to be without for a while. But if there's any tank that I would trust to stay alive even without Last Resort being available, I think Divine has got to be my choice for that, especially with the Kyrian file in this dungeon. That is something big that will give him the ability to stay in where Rentari might have to run away because of the Necrotic stacks that he just has no way to clear. I guess they have Bop, though. That's an advantage of Piami's side, that they can clear Necrotic on demand with Bop, whereas Perplexed, they don't really have that. So, you know what, maybe it's the same number of Necrotic clears between these two teams. They are neck and neck right now, though. Getting started on this Portal Guardian pull, you can actually see Perplexed pulling a little bit ahead here. They've killed all of the smaller enemies right at the start of the pull, and they've spawned their Pride already. It is just now showing up for Piami. So Piami, probably about 10 seconds behind here. Very, very close still.
Yeah, I think the time that they lost here from Click's death actually cost them those 5 to 10 seconds that they're behind at this point. They can still make up the time on bosses because that's their strength, right? Like, if you look at the Moonkin Holy Paladin comp, it's actually their strength that with the single target damage with the Celestial Alignment and the Convoke and the Ashen Hollow, compared to Perplex probably having a little bit more AoE damage or more consistent AoE damage in comparison, because the cooldowns of Druids and Paladin are pretty high. It's a 3-minute and a 4-minute cooldown respectively. So whenever those are down, you're definitely going to see a little bit of a little bit less damage on Piami's side, where Perplex has much less cooldown on their AoE damage. So Perplex already gathering up this next pool on top of their Bone Reaver, while Piami was waiting a little bit, had to gather up some time and waiting for some cooldowns, I think, as well. So a little bit of a time loss again for Piami, as they didn't immediately start gathering up this pool. Really nice here to see the Solar Beam, though. One of those nice utility things the Druids provide really makes this pool quite a lot easier when you have that Solar Beam silencing everything for a long time.
And even though Piami pulled that way later than Perplexed, Dr. J had Combustion for that pull, whereas Perplexed did not commit a Combustion to that pull. They are instead going to Combust on this small platform. Piami, though, is still going to get huge damage on this platform because this is where they are committing their Ashen Hallow. Their second Ashen Hallow of the dungeon is on this platform. Both teams are on the exact same pathing right now, where as soon as those second little mob dies here, they're going to spawn their 40% Pride, which they're going to cleave down with this big caster. It has a lot of health, but it's not particularly dangerous as long as you can dodge the tornadoes, which I can't always do, and interrupt the casts, which, you know, somebody else can worry about that. That's also something I don't worry too much about. But as long as you do that, it's not a mob that's actually that deadly, so it's pretty safe to fight it with the Pride here. And so you can see both teams really making good use of this platform. And I really like the strategy from Piami here of actually using the Ashen Hallow for both damage and healing on this platform, rather than trying to save it for the boss, because that's kind of the instincts, the core idea of the group is like, let's just use Ashen Hallow with Prides on bosses, right? That's what we're trying to make happen here. But it turns out Piami have figured out a way that they're going to save more time by using the Ashen Hallow to get to the boss faster. And we can see they actually have pulled this boss ahead of Perplexed by a couple seconds, even with this wing looking a little sloppy for them. And this is the same kind of thing we saw in their match against Echo. They were just gaining this time in this way that's normally characteristic of Perplexed and of Echo, where they just, you know, are slowly gaining time on every little pull. But because I think of Piami's composition advantage, they are instead the team that is making that happen on all of these pulls, and they are the team that can instead afford to have a couple of little things go wrong, and they are still just making up so much time from all that extra damage they are bringing. Look at Igloo's damage here. Even without Ashen Hallow, he is still just contributing so much extra damage on this boss.
Yeah, and the Celeste alignment of Clix is going to be up in a moment here. Unfortunately, the Pride buff just ran out, so he's not going to get the Pride. But he does have the draw soul damage increase and proccing a full moon as well. So huge amount of damage coming out. But Perplexed, I mean, they also have a lot of single target damage. It's actually incredibly close between those two teams. And you will see a little bit of a back and forth whenever Piami has their Ashen Hollow available. They're going to be a little bit ahead, while Perplexed has more, as I said, consistent damage. So you can see Piami, once Clix popped that cooldown, they got ahead in single target damage and they're now already done, while Perplexed is a little bit behind. This is incredibly close between those two teams, as they now have one of those really dangerous pulls. The last time, two times before, Rentari actually had some issues here with gathering up this pull, because he has to also open the banner here, the Necrolord banner.
And it looks like they may... Oh, yeah, there he goes. So he's going to use Sigil Chains, Sigil of Silence, and then they have an Ursul's Vortex down from Clix, and Rentari's just going to leap on out, activate that banner. Meanwhile, the trees there, the Force of Nature from Clix, is going to be used to keep the mobs taunted, keep them grouped up, and to keep them from going and meleeing their mage, which is something that they did have happen to them last time once those trees expired. But this time, no such issues for Piami. They are going to activate that banner with the Necrolord ability on Rentari while not losing any time or any deaths to this pull, and that looks really, really, really strong for them. They are now making their way down the bridge.
Perplexed actually had a cast go through from one of the Slash Spears. You can see the disease on everybody. This is why they're cutting out this pull. And they're actually doing a much bigger pull as well. They pulled the Patrol on top of this initial pull.
Yeah.
The only thing they succeeded was one Butcher. Everything else was being pulled on top. So this is a bigger pull by Perplexed. But you can see that they're struggling a little bit. A Shine going down because he still had this disease as well on him. So that's a 20% damage reduction on the whole group. They do have a disease dispel on Swagfist here, which takes a long time for you to get all of those dispels off. So this is why they're struggling here. So even though Perplexed did a bigger pull, Divine Field actually going down immediately releases, and they have to kite out this pull, but this is a huge time loss for Perplexed. This bigger pull just not paying off for them.
This is so brutal for Perplexed, and really heads up play there by Piami, slowing that pull down, separating it into two pulls. You know, they've identified that it's not something they can do reliably because of exactly what we've just seen happen to Perplexed there. And last time Piami was in this area, they were having difficulty with that pull as well. So, I mean, it's something that it takes a lot of confidence to be able to slow down your path, but when you figure out that you can't do it the faster way reliably, Piami are really going to get rewarded here for this safer approach to this dungeon. And they are now in one of the hardest pulls of the dungeon here, right at the start of this bridge towards Gorechop. A lot of enemies here, but they have this Ashen Hallow. You can see it is down, and it is providing them a tremendous amount of extra healing. And just with the Ashen Hallow, look at how much everybody's health is going to be stabilized just incidentally as long as they're standing inside that Ashen Hallow, which they are now walking outside of. Every Holy Paladin does love it when the pull gets kited outside of the Ashen Hallow, but sometimes you can't avoid it with the Sanguine, right, that's going on right now.
Yeah, that was incredibly well done by Piami here to be able to pull this off. This is a pull we've seen multiple teams wipe to. Perplexed now attempting the same thing on their side, but they already had trouble previously, so this might actually be incredibly hard for them to do, considering that they lost some defensives on the previous pull. Also no procs on Divine Field as well, as he really stacks high on that Necrotic. He did just use his Curian Vial to get rid of those. Looks like they also pulled it off, but of course they're now 6 deaths on the board, so 25 seconds in favor of Piami as they're already done with their Pride.
Yeah, Piami are now moving into Gorechop. They're going to pull these trash mobs as well onto the boss, and that should be, I mean, this is something that we see a lot of teams do. Gorechop itself, though, is a boss fight that we actually have seen cause some problems for several teams. Just the hooks, the mechanics of the fight itself are actually pretty challenging, particularly when it overlaps with the boss's grip, or when you're dealing with the other trash mechanics of the area as well. So we're going to be watching to make sure that these teams are able to dodge those hooks and avoid having any problems here. But if all goes well for Piami, they are going to have a commanding lead, as they will be, I mean, their boss is already sub 50% as Perplexed are just pulling it here, and they have those 25 extra seconds of death differential. Both teams do have that Battle Res resource available. Looks like both tanks have their Last Resort available if needed as well. Now it's recovered for Divine Field from its earlier proc in the dungeon. So that is a little bit of wiggle room that they're going to have. It is worth noting that one other benefit of the Piami comp, as Wolf Disco is under a lot of damage there from the Perplexed side, one extra benefit, though, of the Piami comp is they have that instant cast Battle Res from Clix on the Moonkin, right? So that gives them a little bit easier chance to deploy the Battle Res, whereas Perplexed, you can see Divine is under a lot of danger here, and if he dies, they are going to have to actually cast that Engineering Battle Res on him. Gorechop got some Sanguine healing there as well. It's the Last Resort proc again for Divine Field. That is once again used. You can see he's into Demon form, and that will make sure he's safe, but there is that Last Resort that is gone now for the future.
Yeah, he didn't have that Curian Vial available because he had to use it on the previous pull, and now he was up to 22 Necrotic stacks, having to tank the Butcher and the Vanguard here on top of the boss. And this boss does do quite a lot of tank damage, so he tried to jump away in an attempt of resetting the Necrotic on him because he didn't have anything else ready, and then Gorechop was kited through that Sanguine for a little bit. Thankfully, it was only very briefly, so he shouldn't have gotten too much heal, if any at all, so not too bad. But Piami, though, they're already on that next mini-boss here in that last wing that they have to deal with. Now, there's going to be one crucial moment for them now. After this pack, they're going to be proccing their 80% Pride, and they want to skip this. They want to use their invisibility potions and leave the Pride behind at the entrance, because they want to deal with the Pride before the last boss, which basically make sure they are not wasting any of that time that you have to wait for the last boss to spawn, because there's a little bit of an RP. And it also makes sure that you have that extra damage for the boss instead of having it for the mini-boss that they play afterwards, which is just more efficient.
Yeah, a little bit of Sanguine healing there. Good movement, though, by Rentari to keep that from being too much of a problem for Piami. Let's see if they are able to execute this prideful skip that you've mentioned here, because it is something that has gotten a lot more inconsistent with patch 9.0.5. So there you can see the Pride is spawned. Everybody's instantly running away. The invisibility potions are used. Let's see if they can keep that out of combat, because it is not necessarily easy to do, but it looks like they have done it. Piami have successfully executed one of those difficult prideful skips now, and they are on to this mini-boss trash section here. You can see they are going to pull out. So Clix actually... oh no, Igloo's dead for Piami. So Clix is going to get that rebirth on him. That's okay, though. Rentari is doing just fine. He's completely healthy here. And they're going to be able to get that res off. The stabilizing Ashen Hallow is coming down now from Igloo. And they have that captain crowd controlled off to the side. Clix actually taunted that out at the start of the pull, and then Curry shackled it out there. And that's really nice because it reduces the damage taken by the stuff near it. So you really want to avoid fighting that with the middle of this pull. Great knock there coming out from Clix as well. The Typhoon is going to help keep managing the Sanguine. There's the Sigil of Chains as well, going to drag those mobs over on the right side of the Sanguine. And a little bit of Sanguine healing coming out there as the mini-boss decides to cast that axe from the middle of a Sanguine puddle and charges through the Sanguine once again. This is actually no, the Sanguine's now gone. That was right there, so at least that's good. It's really important with mobs like this to always be aware of where that Sanguine is relative to you, such that mobs are never traveling through it. That's something you want to avoid wherever possible. And so they're actually going to tag that captain now. It looks like maybe bring it with them.
I think they're just seeing it closer to them, and then they're removing aggro afterwards. At least that's what they did in the past. But it's actually really good for them that Igloo died before he had used that Ashen Hollow, right? So, of course, not good to have a death on the board, but at least he didn't lose his 4-minute cooldown here. So, well done that he still had it up afterwards. And now looks like Rentari just made sure the captain is staying behind there, threw an imprison on him, and now they're fighting stuff. You can imprison that, right? Or
I don't think so. No, I think he just.
Oh no, it's actually
on
shackled.
It. Yeah, so they
shackle
shackled
undead.
it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And now they are getting started here with Zav, the Unfallen, while Perplexed are still working on this trash on the bridge. So PIME, if they can avoid wiping to this boss, it's really basically the end of the dungeon for them. They have this boss, they have that Pride that they skipped, which they're still going to have to kill, and then they have the last boss, and they're going to be all set there. They're going to earn their 100% trash count right at the end of that boss fight and avoid having to kill any extra 100% prides at all. As you can see, getting sent down now for this Druid. It's going to be clicks against Curry here. It's actually pretty good because Dr. J doesn't have combustion, so not a particularly good target for the duel. I guess if he was sent down, he would probably just lose. It's going to be Clicks who is victorious there on the duel. Doesn't have cooldowns available either, though. So it's not going to be translated into a huge damage gain there. Maybe the next duel, though, they'll be able to turn into something. Zav, though, has been pulled by Perplex as well. I didn't catch if Perplex was able to execute the Pride Skip as well. If they have that as well, then they're actually not that far behind.
Yeah, they did execute the Pride Skip, and they also have the advantage of being a full Night Elf group. So they actually fully Shadow Melted off that Captain's aggro, while PIME, of course, is still in combat with this Captain. So either I'm not sure if they can completely avoid it and just go upstairs while still being in combat with it, or if they need to have Igloo go down. We do, like the last time when I played this dungeon, Igloo actually died on this boss, but it didn't look like it was an intended death because it was like at 20 or 30%. So we'll see how they deal with this captain here as Xav is going down for them. And now they have to deal with that Pride that is still standing there, while Clicks is going to go up and start that event. So they have the last boss there as soon as this Pride is done.
Yeah, that is the way to save the most time possible here. And then he can even jump back down if needed. And, wild charge to avoid taking that fall damage potentially. Let's see exactly how they're deciding to handle that as the rest of the group is working on the Pride. They still have those mobs from the very start of the dungeon that they skipped at the start. And so yeah, he's run back up and then immediately jumps right back down. And there is that wild charge that's going to allow him to land safely and contribute to the end of this Pride here. The entire group cheating towards that portal so that they can get ready to immediately click on that as soon as this Pride is done. And if they've done this right, they will be getting upstairs right when Mordretha becomes attackable, and they will waste absolutely zero time doing that. Meanwhile, Perplexed just getting started on that Pride. You can see PIME are now all upstairs here. It's going to be Rentari running back, tagging one of those mobs that will get them to that 100% threshold. Clicks is going to use Entangling Roots to keep it safely outside of the group, and they're bringing in a couple to just DPS down now, and that 100% trash mob is going to be rooted, and they will kill that right at the end of the pull. But with the Pride, with their Lust, they are going to use the Ashen Hallow. They are going to use every single cooldown in the game, and look how much damage has already been dealt to Mordretha. It's already sub 50%.
Yeah, this boss is just going to be melting for PIME as they have the Ashen Hollow, the Druid cooldowns, Combustion, PI, all of the cooldowns in the world with the Pride buff and the Bloodlust as well. So everything is just dying so quickly as Mordretha is already below 10%. This is going to be PIME winning this first game against Perplexed. And what a performance again by PIME. So well done. What a clean run.
PIME taking that victory, and in the past we had J Crest Manor, but this has got to be like the theater of J because they've been so crazy impressive in this dungeon here, Zyro, as they take the victory. I agree, Zyro. Very, very good.
I just wanted to.
I just wanted to say that. Channel.
Oh, okay.
That's what happens when the boss dies so fast, right?
Yeah, like, exactly. Oh. I mean, Mordretha just instantly melted there. Sorry.
It's all good. It's all good. We've been seeing that trend with like a crazy amount of bosses. We were looking at previously in Sanguine Depths, the dungeon, the very final boss just melts in absolute seconds. PIME was flying through this one.
Yeah, no, it was crazy fast, and yeah, there were a couple like errant deaths here and there, but they all kind of added up to be a lot less than what we saw from Perplexed. Now, unfortunately, apparently we weren't recording, so we don't have a clip of the Perplexed wipe. But I mean, yeah, you guys saw what happened, right? They started kiting out the pull too much for Sanguine. Things stayed alive. Random errant deaths went out. Divine Field out kited his healer. And once the tank goes down, a few more deaths were fed to it, and it just died like probably 45 seconds slower than it could. And for PIME, the way they're playing right now, if you give them an inch, they're taking a mile. They just run with the leads that you give them. They're playing incredibly well right now.
Yeah, I mean, this tournament so far has been such a huge benefit for PIME as they've hit their stride. They've been adapting to the meta very rapidly, and even more rapidly than some of their other opponents here. And, when we're looking at Theater, they already were knowing they were going into it very early on. They know they were prepared for that upper bracket, and it's been showing on display here, Nagura.
Yeah, I mean, they already had the best theater time previously, and now they beat their own time by 1 second. So just improving, even though they already had the best time. That is really good to see. I think PIME is just performing so well. And PIME was always a team where we said they're just like barely below the best teams, and they have the potential to be one of the best, but they were always just like slightly doing something, either not having the proper strategies that are as fast as the number 1, number 2 team, or they had too many like inconsistencies. But now PIME slowly is growing to be that team that is beating the best. They are beating Perplexed, they are beating Echo, so it's just really good to see.
Yeah, Plaguefall is going to be where we're setting our sights next. We've been seeing tons of Plaguefall runs throughout this weekend here. What are the biggest takeaways that you would have for either of the teams right now, Dratnos, for them to win?
Yeah, I mean, Plaguefall is an interesting one because it is not one that we've seen PIME in yet, I don't think. So it's something where, this Theater of Pain, right? It was something that was in their matchup against Echo. It was going to be in their matchup then against Perplexed. And so they came into this tournament with like a banger Theater of Pain route that was better strategy, better composition, faster time than what the other teams, including Perplexed and Echo, had. And that worked out really well for them, and it was really clever for them to spend so much, or maybe not even spend that much time, but come up with such a great strategy for that dungeon. We'll have to see whether that holds true for Plaguefall as well, though, because Plaguefall is an intensely technical dungeon. There's so much going on in this place, particularly with how you're choosing to handle the very first pit of the dungeon. And I think out of Perplexed, we've seen some really clever usage of the first couple pulls of the dungeon, really good ways of making sure that they're not losing too much time. They're coming up with creative ways to fight bosses with trash, to save a lot of time in the first area. And I think that is something that might mean that we're seeing a little bit of a reverse than that Theater of Pain, where, Perplexed will have the edge unless there are several things that go wrong for them if their strategy is faster. Or PIME could just actually have as good or better of a strategy. We haven't seen it yet, but my guess is that it won't be as good for them as the Theater was. I think Theater was really their specialty so far.
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest things we've been looking at in a lot of respects, Sigurd, is teams metagaming and preparing for those specific dungeons. And when it comes to something like Plaguefall, they're saying, well, we're not really having to play that much on the side of PIME, so it definitely lends to that theory that Zyro's got, I think, that they may be focusing a little bit more on Sanguine Depths, which is something that had also been very strong for them in the past.
It's definitely true. It's definitely true. I do want to mention, though, that little finicky mage things like spell sealing plague bearers tend to be something that's Dr. J's specialty.
True.
Sorry.
I just wanted to say that this is actually the last time we have Plaguefall at all today, so there's not going to be any more Plaguefalls, and they haven't played it before. So a dungeon that is only there one single time in your whole way through the tournament is definitely going to be, not something that you're going to be practicing too much. But PIME being in that upper bracket means that there's generally less series that you have to play. So it's definitely possible that they still put a lot of time and effort into it, considering that they won their game against Echo, so they had a lot of time to prepare anyway, right?
Yeah, and that's another good thing to mention as well when we're starting to look at these upper finals in a lot of respects. Stratos is the winner of this goes on to the grand finals and has a crazy amount of time to be able to prepare and practice. And that also is going to give a huge advantage. We've only seen it one time this season where somebody comes from the lower bracket and sweeps out the champions, the former champions.
Yeah, Particularly with the bracket dynamic that we have right now, it is even more valuable than it has been in previous weekends to be this team that wins in the upper bracket right now. Because in the past, we've had, first and second seed coming together in this upper finals. Loser gets knocked down to the lower bracket and then wins, and then meet up in the cup finals, and that's fine. And it is an advantage to be that upper bracket team there. But now we're in this position where you get sent down to the lower bracket, you're going to have to prepare for a match against either Golden Guardians or Echo. And so that is a team of a really high caliber to be waiting for you in the lower bracket. And it's going to even more split your attention between the lower finals and the cup finals if you are that team that's sent down here. So this is an incredibly high stakes match. And I think that, whichever team does win this series is going to have such a huge advantage for that cup finals.
Yeah, and this weekend, in a lot of respects, is the crucible for a lot of these teams. There has been the adaptation to the Holy Paladin meta that's been rising steadily. There have been a lot of melee mains or historical melee mains having to switch into the Shadow Priest and start really showing off their multi-classing, multi-specking chops in a lot of respects. And we've got 905 with a bit of dungeon changes, with a bit of strategy changes that a lot of teams have to adjust to. So really the biggest challenge and really one of the most important weekends we've had for MDI so far. We're going to be starting up with game number 2 as PIME is up 1 versus Perplexed. Let's get into the Plaguefall.
All right, so let's see what those two teams have for us here in this Plaguefall. One thing to note before we start this dungeon is that the fastest time we've seen in Plaguefall was actually by Echo in their very, very first game, where they had a 14 minutes 50 time. So both of these teams had the option to watch what Echo is doing in this dungeon and theoretically adjust some things to what Echo is doing to be able to get such a fast time as well. So let's see what these teams are doing. We haven't seen PIME yet, so we do know approximately what Perplexed is doing, but PIME we haven't seen at all.
Big pulls coming right off the bat here for both teams. A lot of mobs getting involved in this. You can see a sheep thing off to the side as well. That might be their permanent fungal mancer on the side of PIME. And so, Igloo's already under a lot of attack here. So the Grievous stacks on the entire group here are going to be a big problem. This pull does a lot of group-wide damage, and you can see both healers really trying their best to make sure that everybody is going to be able to be kept up through that. And even though you're not seeing like huge HPS numbers here, when somebody is in danger on this pull, they need to be topped quickly or else they could die within the next couple of globals. But yeah, you can see PIME making really short work of that pull, as are Perplexed. Both teams spawning their 20% prides, and they're now pulling that pride forward. Ooh. Dr. J has to ice block there. That's an ice block, and it looks like either a Lay on Hands... Yeah, Lay on Hands was also committed to him there by Igloo, so that is a crucial set of long cooldowns that they aren't going to have available here. But this is one of the harder pulls of the dungeon, so given that they're able to successfully do this, that's great news there for PIME. Perplexed, though, have moved ahead further in this dungeon. They are already taking this pride up into the little doorway here, and we know that they are about to get started with a massive Gushing Slime into boss pull.
Yeah, this is going to be very crucial for Perplexed as they're gathering up all of the slimes here on top of the boss as well. We're going to see all of the cooldowns being popped, but Divine Fill is dropping so incredibly low as they're gathering. But PIME having a full team wipe almost, it looks like. Almost everyone died except Rentari still struggling to stay alive. And this is going to be a disaster for PIME as they still have the Fungal Mancer alive, so they can't have any sort of rests. And Dr. J is just trying to get the spell steals off. But yeah, now they're just wasting the pride uptime. This is a disaster for PIME.
Yeah, this is such a brutal setback to occur for PIME. Now all eyes on Perplexed. If Perplexed is able to execute their strategy quickly here, I don't think there's too much chance for PIME to close things up here. They need something to go wrong for Perplexed already at this stage in the dungeon, because Perplexed has such a fast run through here. PIME, though, are going to be trying their best to close things up. They are getting started on the boss here. There's the Bloodlust, there's the Ashen Hallow, so they will be trying to do everything just as well as Perplexed have. They have the same pull here, which is all the slimes into the boss, but Dr. J is dead.
They do have Battle Rest available. Clicks just got Dr. J back up, but this is really bad because he's losing all of the Wonder Growth buffs from the Fungal Mancer, so he's not going to have that huge damage anymore. Thankfully, he did already use his Combust, so most of the damage should have already been out from Dr. J, but still a huge damage loss for them, as they now have to finish up this boss without having that extra buff on him. He can spell steal some more, of course, but it's going to take him a while. And you see all of those slimes coming in that they have to see. It looks like they might even have to kill the bigger slime here because they don't have any CC to deal with it.
This is so tough for PIME here. This boss is going to take them so long, and if we just look at that boss 1 split at the bottom here, this split is going to take them twice as long as it's taken Perplexed. Perplexed have gained so much time here, and they've kept their Fungalmancer alive. They have used their Fungalmancer, if you look at their damage meters, to facilitate this massive AoE pull here. PIME killed their Fungalmancer. They brought it in under the boss and cleaved it down as Dr. J died there, which is tough. I mean, it's tough. It means that they're going to have to do the rest of this dungeon a little bit slower than Perplexed will. Some teams do that as part of a planned strategy, and I imagine it was part of the plan for PIME, but I think it indicates a slower plan than what Perplexed are able to do here. As you can see just how much damage Wolf Disco is doing with all of those stacks, just how large his character is now. He is walking through there, and he is a giant. Oh, he's shrunk back down to size now as that buff is finally expiring for them. So that is going to be the end of the Wonder Grow section of the dungeon for Perplexed. They are going to do the rest of this dungeon the old-fashioned way, just as the designers intended, with normal-sized players doing the rest of the dungeon. And yeah, I mean, it's a huge advantage for Perplexed. You can just look at the difference here. And PIME are actually potentially going to have trouble even finishing this boss. Look at their health bars. And Globgrog still has quite a bit of health. Clicks and Dr. J are both down for PIME. And we may see Globgrog claim another team here if it does consume that smorgasbord, which it does. Oof. Oh no, Nagura.
Yeah, I don't think they can recover from this. The problem with the comp that both PIME and Perplex are running here is that they have very, very limited CC for these slimes on this boss. So this is why they're actually their strategy is just to kill the boss before the slimes even become a problem. But if you don't have that Pride buff, if you don't have a Fungalmancer buff on your mage, if you don't have Bloodlust available, then all of a sudden the boss takes so long that you cannot deal with those anymore. You either have to switch them and kill them, which makes the boss take even longer, or you just have to try and kite it out, which didn't seem to be working for PIME here. So yeah, they might even be struggling to finish up this boss now at all, as they just are completely out of cooldowns at this point. But Perplexed not having any issues whatsoever, as they have a perfect run so far. 0 deaths, and none of the pulls went wrong at all. Everything seemed to be working perfectly clean for them.
Yeah, they landed a beautiful Plague Borer explosion onto the Prideful mini boss and the other mini boss at the top of the stairs as well at the same time. Then they got the perfect spawn timing of the last set of Plague Borers. They were able to use that to bring it down and kill this trash pack, and now they're going to pull all the rest of the trash onto the boss here. And their dungeon is just so stable because of how fast they are doing it. Because of the speed with which they're killing everything, nothing is alive for long enough to pose them a challenge. And that's the thing about this dungeon, is that the faster you're going, the safer it is, because nothing is getting to those second casts. Nothing is living for long enough to kill your group. And that, I mean, it is such a unique Plaguefall thing. Where normally we think about these dungeons, and the more aggressive you're going, the bigger you're pulling, the faster you're trying to do everything, the more dangerous it is. But in many ways, Plaguefall is the opposite, where if you can find ways to combine pulls and speed things up and use Plague Borers, use a Pride buff, use a Wonder Grow for more and more stuff, it actually makes the entire dungeon both faster and safer. And I mean, just look at the speed that Perplexed is setting here. 0 deaths so far in this dungeon. They are going to be done with the second boss here at around that 7-minute mark, which is completely absurd. There's the anti-magic zone as the Plague Bomb is exploding, and everybody is going to live that just fine there. They've committed a lot of defensive stat, but that means that they get to save all of the damage to it. As where is Ryson off to there? You can see him mount up on his horse and head off behind the mushroom there. Do you know what's going on with that?
No, I actually do not know. He just now came back to the group. That was very interesting. I wonder why he did that. Maybe they congealed slime. Maybe he was taunting it around the corner or something like that. Either way, it looked very interesting. As they're now having to kill Dr. Ickes before the Plague Bomb goes off, they should be having enough damage, as the boss is already on 6%, and there's still a couple of seconds left for them. But PIME having more and more issues as they basically skipped past the first boss to do their trash pull to spawn the 40% Pride, so they can then go back and kill the boss with that Pride buff, I would assume at least. Doesn't look like it. I think they're just gonna not kill that boss, they're just gonna move on, do all the other bosses, and then maybe at the very end be like, yeah, now we maybe come back to that previous boss. Or maybe they hope the dungeon just finishes without them killing that first boss.
Yeah, if you're in PIME's situation here, the writing is on the wall for you, right? You know that there is an overwhelming chance that you're going to lose this dungeon. Although we do have a death coming out for Perplexed, But I mean, with just so much having gone wrong for PIME, I don't know what you're hoping to have happen to Perplexed. Something like this is the start of it, though. This skip turning into a wipe for Perplexed is exactly what PIME is looking to have happen to open the door for them to back in the game. And it kind of looks like they are just going forward with the dungeon. Maybe they're just going to do the whole dungeon and then afterwards be like,
I think so, yeah.
all right, we'll go finish off Globgrog now. There's a lot of... It's tough to come up with the best way to try and recover from something where things have gone wrong and you don't have the cooldowns you want for a boss, especially for something like Globgrog. It might be in their best interest to, just say, you know what, we'll come back right at the end of the dungeon, and that'll be better than waiting around here and trying to get another Pride and then going back. We'll have to see. They might U-turn after this Pride as well. Perplexed, though, have sorted out their skip. They have made it through after all, and that's something, this time loss is certainly going to take them out of contention for beating Echo's time, I think. That sub 15-minute dream, I imagine, is now dead for Perplexed, but maybe not. I mean, their run was so clean up to now. It is tyrannical, though, so these bosses do add quite a bit of time to the dungeon.
Yeah, I do agree the bosses take a long time, but those 3 deaths with that failed skip are probably not going to be able to compete with that echo time. But, I mean, if more things go wrong for Perplexed, I do think that PIME just said, you know what, we're going to finish the dungeon without doing that boss because we don't have the buffs that we need to even deal with it. And then at the very end, if they still didn't lose, right? If they kill the last boss and no one's saying that they lost yet, then they can go back and attempt that boss again. I think that is actually a good mentality to have because now they're just continuing their normal routing, which is practice as well, right? Just in this dungeon, and maybe get into the right mindset. Just completely ignore that something went wrong on the first boss. Just make sure they play the rest of the dungeon. And once they are at the very end, if things go wrong for Perplexed, and somehow they lose a lot of time, then eventually they can still go back and kill that boss. But Perplexed, not losing any time whatsoever as they're pulling the boss on top of that 80% Pride.
Yeah, that is a very fast and aggressive strategy, especially with that venomous sniper still involved in the party as well. That is going to be adding a little bit even more damage here, and it presents the potential for something to go wrong for them, similarly to how it did yesterday in this dungeon, where Ryson was targeted by both the stun and a sniper shot and potentially an auto attack from an assassin all at the same time, and just was killed in the duration of a stun. But luckily that hasn't happened to them there. They've killed off that sniper. Here does come one of those stuns onto Ryson, so this is a little bit of a scary moment, but you can see he had a little bit of a shield built up on himself there, and he's going to be able to survive that nice and easily, and they are going to be just fine working on this boss now with all that trash taken care of with the Pride buff here. They do need to stabilize Divine's health a little bit. Divine, without that last resort available, is actually going to take the lay on hands here to get topped up by Ryson. And Ryson, low on cooldowns right now, doesn't have wings. Ashen Hallow already committed. Is going to be having potentially a little bit of difficulty keeping the group up if there is heavy group-wide damage. Even just Divine taking all this damage. I mean, look at Divine's health right now. Divine does not have much wiggle room here. I don't think he has his... he might have his Splintered Heart trinket available if he were to be about to die, but still, this is a scary, scary boss fight to have a Paladin with no cooldowns trying to heal, but that's what you got to do if you want to get the full damage from the Paladin.
Yeah, definitely. And then this boss just generally does a lot of damage whenever those Brood Assassins are up. You also get that Poison debuff from the boss as well. And then you also have Grievous, which can be hard to heal whenever you don't have those cooldowns up, as you just mentioned. So definitely having a little bit of an issue here with this boss, but it looks like Dominant Venomblade is about to go down. And they, of course, do have enough trash. 86% is fine to go downstairs to finish up that last 14% that they still need in that last boss room area. We saw how Divine Field is actually dealing with this last boss room, and it looks very risky, but also very pretty, as he's just jumping into the middle of all of these trash packs and just gathering them all up in the middle area in that pool.
Yeah, this is something that we've seen Perplexed do really well. Divine is going to hop into that pool in the middle, the little jacuzzi there, where the boss will be spawning later, after he finishes chaining his infinite Fell Devastations there from that newly buffed legendary. And so in this pool, as long as you keep jumping, you don't actually end up taking any damage from it. If you stop jumping for even a millisecond, you are going to start accruing stacks of a very damaging thing. Wow, look at all the damage from those auto attacks. But because he was jumping in that pool, that was the closest point for all three of those packs, and it groups them up really quickly. And then they're going to use this Ring of Frost here as well to provide a little bit of a CC and a slow to prevent the Shades from getting to the squishy DPS members of the group. And I mean, really, really beautifully executed there by Perplexed. The speed with which they dealt with that pull, I mean, it is incredibly impressive given just how much damage comes out from any auto attack of any of those devoted mobs.
Yeah, definitely. They're now proccing their 100% Pride. We've seen teams change their strategy a little bit here, where they immediately pull the Pride on top of the boss, and this is exactly what Perplex is doing here. Not even getting it a little bit lower first. They just immediately pull it on top, which is incredibly risky because of the huge amount of damage that Stradama already does on a group with that stacking disease. So it looks like they got the Pride done. Stradama is going to be facing in a second, but she's still casting that Infectious Rain. So that's why we see the AMZ just being popped by a Shine to reduce that magic damage a little bit. And yeah, just really well done by Perplex, also using the Bloodlust to be able to get through this phase 1 and the Pride.
Yeah, now they have this Pride buff, and they will have the Pride buff for phase 2. I think Ryson's Ashen Hallow will be available for either phase 2 or 3 as well. You can see Wings not actually committed by Ryson there as well. Had some nice Wings procs to give him the Wings for basically the entire phase 1 without having to actually press the button. And here is the Ashen Hallow. So this is going to be a big damage burn from Perplexed into phase 2 with Wings and Ashen Hallow coming down in addition to Combustion, Dark Transformation, and Apocalypse from Shine.
Yeah, huge damage coming out of Perplex here on Stradama, already facing the boss just after a couple of seconds, really. And if we look at the time, it's already past the time that Echo had in this dungeon. Echo had 1450, so Perplex definitely a little bit slower because of those few issues that they had with that skip, but they seem to be faster than their previous time. Their best time was 1541. Against Golden Guardian, so we'll see if they can beat their own time at least.
Yeah, it is actually a little bit worrying for Perplexed because there is a universe where they will fight Echo for in the Plaguefall for that first seed. If there end up being 2 tiebreaker matches, we could see these 2 teams doing battle, and if that tiebreaker goes to a game 3, it would be in the Plaguefall. So there's a theoretical path to that happening. Pretty tough, though, to end up having the 2 tiebreaker situation, as Perplexed are going to close this out 1542, basically the exact same time they achieved last time, and that is going to even up the series 1-1, which means we're going to Sanguine Depths for game 3.
Oh, that's right. Perplexed taking the victory, responding in kind, taking that out of the hands of Piami, and, well, Piami really just, from the very beginning, was running into a slew of problems here, Zaro.
Yeah, and let's go back to the conversation we had right before this dungeon started where Dratnos said, I wouldn't be surprised to see if they really haven't put too much practice into this dungeon and they're more focusing on the Sanguine Depths. I think he was a bit right here. A lot of the mistakes that PI were making weren't really kind of coherent with the way they've been playing this weekend, right? They were just kind of silly mistakes all over the place, 1 or 2 chip deaths every now and then. Just, it showed that they weren't really practiced on this dungeon, which makes sense because they...
This is the only time.
This is the only time they were going to encounter it this weekend if they do go on an upper bracket, run like they have been going. So it makes sense for them to not have that much practice in this dungeon. And hopefully what that means we'll see is when we get to Sanguine Depths, they should have an absolute banger of a run because they should have put a lot more of their practice time into that.
Yeah, no question onto that one. And, when we also kind of look at Sanguine Depths in particular, it is such a technical and very time-intensive run to be able to practice because of how challenging those affixes are, Nagura.
Yeah, I mean, Sanguine Depths, we've seen almost all teams that played that dungeon this tournament struggle at least a little bit. I think the fastest time that we've seen was by Obey Alliance, and they had 20 minutes 32, which is definitely a slower time than we've seen before with easier affixes. Because the kind of combination that we have is 45 Bullstring, and that is just never something you want to see in Sanguine, especially because you have those different kinds of HP mobs. You have the Overseers that have a huge amount of HP and also reduce your damage done the longer they are up. And it's just causing lots and lots of issues for these players.
Yeah. And Necrotic as well. Fortified Bullstring and Necrotic. All 3 of those affixes are here in Sanguine Depths. And that is, this is a sadistic combination of affixes. to level at our players here, and that is their punishment for this game 3 that they have they've made it to. It's going to be Sanguine Depths, and 20 minutes 32 seconds out of Obey Alliance from a run that it looked very, very good relative to the expectation in this dungeon, which is, basically every team we've seen in here has had at least one full catastrophe. Even Echo in this dungeon, full team wipe with more than 5 deaths even involved in that situation. So PIME and Perplexed, whichever of these teams is able to clutch out a clean run, if one of them is able to do it, it should be good enough in this series, because I think they are more likely than not going to have problems in this dungeon.
Yeah, and it's very similar to what we've seen out of Spires of Ascension or Necrotic Wake, where no matter how good these teams have been over the past 4 cup tournaments and everything like that, at least one time people have had some catastrophic failures in something like Sanguine. When we look at how groups have really started progressing through their strategies and everything, Zyro, well, there's lantern changes now. There's a lot of little route changes that people are going to be accounting for with the 905 updates to the dungeon. So it's even more pressure on them.
Yeah, it's actually kind of funny looking at the maps here, set that we have this weekend for Cup 4. I think we covered it a little bit this weekend, and one of the ways that Dratnos described it is that we have 4 dungeons that are mines in the minefield that the teams have to avoid. And to kind of clarify that, if these are affix combinations that would pop up on live, and you got a message from your team, one of your teammates, hey, you want to push keys next week? And you're like, oh yeah, that sounds good. Oh, actually, I'm banned until next week. Oh, that's really unfortunate. What can you do, man? It's actually just really difficult, right? These are not affix combinations that you'll see teams really want to deal with on live at all, but in the MDI, you don't really get that choice. You have to play through it, and you have to go for your best run here. And I think PIME is one of our more technical teams, specifically for the Sanguine Depths. They had a relatively clean run earlier on. They have a lot to improve on from that, because the 4 deaths were pretty bad for them, but they could definitely improve a lot here. And I think they're pretty confident in their strategy as well.
Yeah, and you definitely have to be for teams of this caliber who are stepping into this tournament. And in a lot of respects, Stratos, it's not properly fleshed out, not properly displayed how challenging some of these affixes are to deal with. Because we'll just say, oh yeah, the affixes are hard, so they went a little bit slower. But in reality, the extra work that they have to do to be able to kill everything evenly, especially in something like Sanguine, where the differences in mob health are ridiculously vast.
Yeah, it's not like you can afford to actually do a really slow and steady weekly no lever path, because if you do that, you're still going to lose to the other team, even if they have a wipe or 2, right? You need to have a path that is fast enough to beat that kind of situation out of the other team, which usually means you have to take a risk on basically every single pull. And it's a little, you obviously do a little bit of a slower path than you would under fully optimal affix situation, but you can't afford to slow down, which means you are always going to be pushing the limit of what is possible in this sort of dungeon with these affixes. And that's just so much volatility here. And yeah, whichever of these 2 teams emerges from this dungeon, the victor is certainly going to be a worthy upper bracket entrant into our cup finals. It is going to be grueling, the Sanguine Depths here, and it's going to be so scary for both these teams, knowing they're up against such high caliber competition that are also running this dungeon. It is such a tough position to be in. Yeah, I do not envy these teams. This is going to be a hard one.
But the reward, all right, the reward for it, though, is so crazy, because getting that grand finals, being able to sit there, practice, watch the other teams, watch them suffer through the bloodbath to see who gets 3rd, 4th, 2nd, everything like that. The reward is so high for them. So,
the reward of getting to the grand finals and getting to play Sanguine Depths again.
True! That's also true. But hey, any team that's going to be able to win, whether it's PIME or Perplexed, if they win in a Sanguine Depths, they got to feel confident no matter who they're going to be facing up against in the grand finals, all right? We've seen Echo slip a little bit earlier yesterday, for example, in Nagura, but they bounced back really rapidly. So, they will definitely be a tough opponent in the lower bracket when we get there, but no matter who's in that grand final slot, they got to be feeling confident.
Definitely. I think... okay, so this is really tough for them, because not only do they have to play Sanguine Depths, where literally anything can happen, because, we just talked about how difficult this dungeon is, but then if you lose this dungeon, you also go into the lower bracket having to play Echo or Golden Guardians, and you don't want to meet either of those teams, right? So it's going to be incredibly grueling for those teams if they lose this game. And in a Sanguine Depths where for example, Perplexed hasn't even played Sanguine Depths at all in this Cup 4, so maybe they hadn't have time to practice it as much as maybe other teams, which is just going to be incredibly hard for them. And then PIME did play the dungeon, but they had a 22 minutes time, which is 2 minutes slower than the best time we've seen. So this is going to be so much pressure on both of those teams to be able to perform here.
I think this has got to be the number one thing Perplexed has started practicing yesterday. Once they got their win and moved on, this has got to be just top of their list or near the top of their list here. Game number 3, our decider to see who moves on into our finals, who drops to the lower finals between PIME and Perplexed. We're going to be sealing the deal here in Sanguine Depths.
Yeah, I mean, this is something where the fact that it does show up here for these teams in both the upper finals and in the finals, there's basically no avoiding this dungeon. Much as teams may wish to avoid it, may prefer if they could find a path through the bracket without having to encounter this dungeon, there's really no way. You can't win the cup without playing Sanguine Depths. It is in all of these crucial parts of the bracket. And so these teams, I mean, they've just got to be ready for it, and they've just got to have something good here. I am really excited to see what Perplexed looks like in here, because we don't know. We don't know yet what it is going to look like out of them. Right off the bat here, we do have a difference in team compositions as they are getting started with their very first pull here. We know both teams are going to like to pull a lot of mobs back here onto this Venthyr Lantern. Perplexed are playing that Death Knight, whereas PIME have clicks on that Moonkin, and I love the Moonkin in this dungeon with bolstering Necrotic this week. I would give PIME an edge here from seeing the composition difference between these two teams. I think I like PIME's position.
Yeah, so I personally agree that I like the Druid for the utility, especially because this dungeon is so difficult with the affixes. But I do think that the DK should be having overall more damage. So if Perplexed can actually manage to deal with all of those affixes and all of the mobs without needing that extra utility from the Druid, then theoretically Perplexed should be having the edge. But we've seen almost all teams struggle here, so that's going to be really hard for Perplexed to be able to not have any sort of issues, especially if you're missing those Force of Nature, that Vortex, that Typhoon to help you out with the Necrotic and with the bolstering, and also being able to keep everything on top of those lanterns, the Venthyr lanterns that you need to be using properly to get that buff.
Yeah, it is a crucial part of this dungeon, especially because those Venthyr Lanterns were buffed coming into patch 9.0.5. They last longer, both in the buff and in the time that they are open on the ground, which means getting good value out of them is even more important than ever before. As we can see PIME getting started with this massive pull. They're going to use Bop on Rentari here to let him group everything up without having any danger there. It means the rest of the group has to stay out of combat until it is all grouped up, but a really good job there of then into that Solar Beam. They are preventing these mobs from doing stuff as much as possible there. Then the Sigil of Silence, Sigil of Misery, the Dragon's Breath, all committed here, and that's going to prevent the ticks from getting too many of those Engorge casts off. And beautiful execution of the pull there by PIME. They are spawning their Pride, but so are Perplexed. Perplexed spawning their Pride milliseconds after PIME, and these two teams neck and neck here. 0 deaths in this first little part of the dungeon, and that is not easy to do. We've seen in earlier series teams accumulating 15 deaths between them before this point in the dungeon, so credit to both teams so far having this worked out, having this first difficult part of the dungeon worked out. As you can see, PIME walking towards that boss there. They're looking to get a little antsy. Maybe they're going to get in combat with this boss before the Pride even goes down. Looks like, okay, now oh yeah, right before the Pride goes down, they are getting right in there, and there is the Time Warp coming out from them, so they are getting started on this boss fight a solid chunk of time ahead of where Perplexed will do it, and they have a little bit more single target damage theoretically with the Moonkin, although Celestial Alignment not going to be available potentially until right as that Pride buff is falling off, so maybe that actually will not be realized on this boss. I mean, but look at the boss health here. It's already 40% as Perplexed are pulling it. Oh my goodness, the damage.
It does a huge amount of damage by PIME to be able to deal with this Pride so quickly, even though Perplexed did spawn the Pride just a second or two after PIME. It took them quite a lot longer to deal with it. So definitely PIME being ahead at this point because they dealt with the Pride earlier, but Perplexed having so much single target damage as they're really close to just catching up to their time. And I mean, incredibly well done by both of those teams so far. A couple of trash packs before the first boss really have been trash packs that teams struggled with and had wipes too. So well done by both those teams. Perplexed did play, I think, one extra tick, so they're up to 21% compared to the 20% from PIME, but that shouldn't be making a huge difference later on.
Yeah, some teams have had different ways of approaching this dungeon, but I think usually it does end up being the same total amount of pulls regardless of how you do that. You just get to slightly mess around with which mobs are in which pulls and whether you pull like a bat during the final gauntlet or not. And that can certainly matter, and there's definitely a right answer, but it's really hard to tell what that right answer is. And whatever it is, much more important is going to be the execution of whichever strategy you have chosen. You can see Piami already starting to walk their way forward here. These mobs are getting pretty low on health, but this is not the scary pull. The scary pull is going to be the next pull that we see here. It is such a difficult combination of enemies that they are going to be doing right once they can finish this one off. You can see Rentari starting to kite there, Divine kiting as well on the side of Perplexed. Perplexed actually finishing off their pull ahead of where Piami are, and they are getting started now with this really, really, really scary pull. Perhaps, oh my goodness, no they are not. Perplexed are going slow here. They are just fighting this 3-pack all by itself. Piami are going for it, though. They are risking it for the biscuit. They are running into that little room there, and Rentari casting the Fell Devastation, and they are going to be fighting a lot of Overseers and Depressors all at the same time here. So a completely different strategy between these teams. This is so risky for Piami. It's such a bold pull, but if this works out, they will have a huge time advantage over Perplexed.
Yeah, that's a double Overseer pack plus the Oppressors from the inside room that Rentari just all gathered up here. You see the chains coming out of the Overseers, not even outranging it. Dr. G just standing there, tanking the damage as they're confident in their healer to be able to out-heal it, and they know the Overseers have to die quickly. Of course, we also have bolstering. You see this Overseer is actually hugely bolstered. This Overseer needs to die quick. Otherwise, if the bindings come out of this Overseer, then that can cause people to die. So there we go. They didn't manage to finish off and proc the 40% pride. So yeah, that pull really paid off for Piami as they got a huge amount of stacks here from that lantern and also have the pride now as well.
Ryzen went down for Perplexed as well, so that's going to cost them their battle res. And so Perplexed actually doing this in 2 pulls, whereas Piami have figured out a way to do it in 1, and Piami didn't have any deaths here. And I cannot overstate how impressive it is. This pull is the pull that wiped Echo earlier in their series in this dungeon. So the fact that Piami have executed it so quickly and so cleanly, 0 deaths, I mean, this is a tremendous advantage that they've got now. In addition to that battle res and those 5 seconds from the death on the side of Perplexed, I mean, they already have this pride buff and they are running into this room already, whereas Perplexed are still just working on that pride. I mean, Piami, I'm so impressed by the fact that they were able to pull that off. I'm amazed by the fact that it worked, and I'm amazed by how bold they were to attempt it and to have that in their route, especially given how wrong it went for Echo yesterday.
Yeah, that was incredibly clean by Piami. Now they're also pulling this Overseer pack into the mini-boss. They also have an advantage here because they have the Soothe from the Moonkin, who can actually soothe off the enrage effect from these neutral mobs that the mini-boss casts. Without the Soothe, they're gonna have to be killed, which Perplexed didn't seem to have an issue though. Actually, no, there we go. You see the neutral mob in the back that they have to be fighting here. If they had a Soothe effect, it would already be dead because it also removes the HP that they gain from the enrage effect. So a little bit of a time loss for not having that extra Soothe, while Piami is already gathering everything up on this lantern. But Perplexed, I mean, they're really close behind.
Yeah, Perplexed actually have done a really good job of efficient damage prioritization here, which means that even though they've done this dungeon in an extra pull now relative to Piami, some of those pulls they've managed to do a little bit more quickly. And I mean, still, Piami have the lead here, right? Piami have finished this pull, whereas Perplexed still have it at 50%, but it is not a huge advantage. And I mean, that just goes to show how insane it is to do that big pull that Piami did, even though it's only for a pretty small time advantage and it's such a scary pull, but it did give them that time advantage. So they are now working their way over towards the second Venthyr Lantern. And what they are really trying to do here is roll this buff over. It's a 75-second buff that they've gained from that first Venthyr Lantern, and ideally what they want to do is activate the second Venthyr Lantern before that buff expires and refresh its stack. So you'll see Igloo, the only Venthyr player on Piami, will have the responsibility of clicking on that lantern in a sec. He is a little zoned out right now, though, as there is all of that puddle between him and the lantern. No way for him to get there without taking that damage. But you'll see he's actually Door of Shadows through it. Wow, the Venthyr utility. Just completely insane. Does have to dodge this red swirly, though. And did he find time to activate that lantern? I'm curious. I'm not sure if I saw him finish the cast, and no, he didn't finish the cast. So he's going to have to go and reopen it now. And I'm not sure if they've actually extended their buff here or not. And you can see, looking at the count now, both teams on the exact same count already. And Perplexed actually massively ahead now. They've already killed this Pride, whereas Piami have just started fighting it. So somehow Perplexed have done this section of the dungeon just faster than PIME.
So, okay, the difference was that PIME actually pulled the Sentinel previous to the 60% Pride proc, and Perplexed is pulling it now. So the pull that PIME is doing now should be quicker, because PIME took a long time because of bolstering, so they had to single target the Sentinel before they could AoE everything down. And Perplexed is doing that Sentinel pull now, but they have the Pride buff now, so it should be easier for them to deal with. So a little bit of a difference in pathing actually putting Perplexed ahead. PIME had to deal with that Sentinel pull without the Lantern buff and without the Pride buff, and Perplexed just did it the other way around. And they had all of those buffs, meaning that the Sentinel pull was then a lot faster. And now they're up to 67%. But look at PIME, they are now done with that trash pack as they're up to 72. So both of those teams are so close to one another.
But look at what PIME gets to do now. They have all that Lantern buff and this Pride buff to take into Executor Tarvold. So that is going to be extra damage for them. And that means that even though this boss was pulled at around the same time for both teams, Perplexed got there maybe 10 seconds later, PIME have gotten to deploy so much extra damage here. And so actually, they lost some time up front, but that rewarded them with setting up only easy trash for later in this ring, right? They got to do all of that trash all together, AoE it down, because they took out that Chamber Sentinel. And yeah, great job there by PIME identifying that way to save the time. And they're gonna be rewarded here with a faster boss kill once again. Although I'm curious whether this boss 2 split is actually going to reveal much of a difference in times here between these two teams, because we know that PIME gained time on the boss 1 split. And I think the boss 2 split is actually going to be a gain for Perplexed. Looking at the boss health percentages here, it is still melting for Perplexed.
And they're 4% ahead in trash. So it's actually going to be, it might actually be one less pull for Perplexed after this boss. Well, PIME has to do 4% somewhere, right? So even though the boss is going to go down. Oh yeah, they're pulling it on top of the boss. Okay, so I have the Frenzied Ghouls, which is actually really dangerous for Antari, because they do a lot of damage to the tank, and they also stack up that Necrotic. So that's actually very dangerous, but they managed to do it. But not sure how much time they're going to be saving with this, because the boss died already and they still have to deal with those ghouls.
Yeah, and they are actually, wow, the boss 2 split 7 minutes and 30 seconds for both teams there. Exactly the same time through this section of the dungeon, although PIME still had to finish this trash off right after the boss. So when you factor that in, when you factor the time to get to 74% and kill the boss, it is Perplexed who actually gained time in that section, and I am floored that happened. The fact that PIME was able to execute that massive pull onto that first lantern of that section and still ended up not having a faster split through this area. And wow, look at what Perplexed is up to as well. Perplexed is pulling all this trash, whereas PIME have gone right into the boss. So once again, we have a difference in strategy here. So Perplexed is going to be reaching that 80% Pride threshold, I believe, and they will then be killing that and taking it using it to help kill the boss as fast as possible. Whereas PIME have said, nah, we are going right into the boss right now. We are CCing all of the mobs in this room, and we're just going to kill the boss, and then we will be taking these mobs upstairs with us and killing them with the first mobs on the trash pull at the top of the stairs. And I think once again what that's going to mean is that PIME is going to have one fewer trash pull in this split of the dungeon compared to Perplexed. The question is just going to be if they are able to actually realize a time advantage this time, because they somehow weren't really able to last time.
Yeah, this time around, I mean, I do like the fact that they're pulling all of this trash in this room on top of the next trash pull, as you said, just having one less overall pull, but it takes time to set up, right? You have to get all of that CC and those trash. Then once you go up, you have to put that ring of, you have to put the ring from the mage down, ring of frost, then you have to wait until all of the mobs are gathered. It's gonna take a while for them to gather up that pull. So maybe the time that you lose from having to gather it all up might not actually be worth it. We're gonna have to see what's happening after this boss, as Perplexed is now of course already done with that 80% pride and the trash in this area, and they got the boss down to 45%. Of course, you're also missing the pride buff as well on the boss with the way PIME is playing it, but they gained the pride for the gauntlet area at the start. So different kinds of strategies here as they now gather up all of this trash in that ring of frost, and you can see that the setup time takes quite a while, right?
Yeah, but so PIME is going to get the advantage of having the Pride for the start of the general call Trash Gauntlet, right? They're going to kill the Pride after this pull, and then they will have that massive buff for the first little bit of the General Call Trash Gauntlet, which is a scary part of the dungeon. I mean, Necrotic with that set of trash and bolstering as well are both extremely difficult affixes, even though they don't, they've made it work such that Necrotic and bolstering aren't as bad as they just would be if they affected everything in that area, but they still affect enough of that trash that it is extremely, extremely sketchy with this combination of affixes. So PI will have the benefit of that prideful buff for it. Perplexed will not, but Perplexed are getting started on this trash pool, and I expect that both teams will be starting the General Call Trash Gauntlet at basically the exact same time. So this is a neck and neck race, and this is so incredible. I mean, we have one death between these two teams in Sanguine Depths as we're approaching this final section of the dungeon. And it's so impressive because this dungeon, it is so hard. It is so hard to get through this dungeon without deaths. And I cannot overstate just how much every single one of these trash pulls was such a potential to wipe both of these teams. And great job so far by both of them to avoid that happening. Here they go. Both teams are now going to be skipping through this triple pull here. It's going to be the usage of Mind Soothe and then a bunch of different ways to get through here for all the different players, including, for Perplexed. Yeah, okay, so Divine is going to pull it to the side and run through and meld. The rest of the team needs to make sure they've stayed out of combat or also click their meld buttons, and looks like they've done it, but PI have gotten that skip executed a little bit faster, and they have this Pride buff now to deploy on the start of the pull here, so advantage for PI definitely as we're getting started with this gauntlet.
Yeah, and they also have that Pride buff as well, so they're going to be able to deal with this first pull quite a bit faster. One thing that there's still a difference with is the percentage. So PI actually dealt with a little bit less trash in that ring area. I think it was like 2%. So they're going to have to deal with slightly more trash in this gauntlet area. I do think they also were the team that actually pulled a bet in at some point, so we're gonna have to keep an eye on that and to see what kind of trash they decide to pull extra. But now they're already done with that first initial Kyle pull. They are moving on to this lantern area where they're gonna be getting that buffs, while Perplexed is still trying to deal with this first area. So incredibly close between those two teams still.
Yeah, it'll be so interesting to see what the difference is in the rest of this gauntlet as well, because teams have had different ideas for how to pull the very end of this gauntlet too. Whether you can combine those last two pulls or not, for instance, is a big deal. As you can see, Divine, wow, he's taking a lot of damage for Perplexed as they are trying to set up this big pull on the Lantern. The Lantern has been activated. Divine is going to use Metamorphosis here to try and stay alive, and they've done it. They have killed off all that trash. It is just General Call that's left. Necrotic stacks have been mitigated. I think they were dropped there by File of Serenity for Perplexed. PI are going to tag one last mob into that Lantern, refreshing their buffs up to the full 75 seconds, and they are taking this Dread Bat forward. They do need that bat, as you identified, Nagura, for the extra count that they missed earlier, and they are getting started with this third section of the Trash Gauntlet. They are not running ahead and pulling the rest of the area, though. There's that gargoyle that is further up ahead that they are going to leave by itself. So Perplexed can maybe sneak back into the lead here if they are able to go and grab that with this pull. Let's see if Divine is going to do it. Yes, he is. Look at that. He's going to leap forward, throwing his glaive aggressively, dropping that shield to have a little bit of safety to stand in. Don't try this at home, because if the gauntlet lasts for too long and General Call reaches her Gloom Burst cast and your shield is on cooldown, that is a sketchy situation as Divine is about to die there. Barely stays alive. The sack is going to come out on him as well. Bop used and immediately canceled to remove Necrotic stacks, but then of course you got to cancel it right away to make sure that the mobs don't then instantly melee the rest of your group there. Very well played though by Perplexed, as most of this trash has been dealt with. Divine is though still taking a lot of damage here. There's a lot of bolstering stacks on that Chamber Sentinel, and he is very low on health. He doesn't have Last Resort available. He doesn't have Meta available. They have phased General Call, so they're not going to have to worry about any of those Gloom Burst casts as Divine now runs up and gets started pulling the trash out of this little room there. They're casting a cage on one of the Stonewall Gargons, and they are running now through the room here at 98% count. Are they going to try and skip all of the trash here and just get right onto the like spawn the Pride and then get right onto the boss? Is that the idea which Perplex is going for? Because look at this, they're at 98% count already, 100% for PI. They are spawning their Pride already, and they are going to start killing it. What is Perplexed up to, though?
Yep, it looks like Perplexed might be trying to skip the Pride and do the boss before and then pull the trash in after, so they don't have to deal with it. But they have Bloodlust available, so usually it is worth it to do with the Pride. So this seems pretty slow on their side as they're now
here they
engaging
go.
the boss. They have General Call engaged, as PIME is still dealing with that Pride. But there's so much damage on Divine Field, as he has so much necrotic stacks on him as well. They don't have Bob available from Ryzen, as he's just jumping around trying to kite out the trash, as he has so much necrotic stacks on him. Bloodlust is being popped as well, and he's just trying to survive here as they're just finishing off the last trash percentage. You can see they're at 99%, so this Houndmaster is going to be the one last they have to deal with to proc the 100% Pride. This is so close between those two teams, as PIME is already fighting Cal, but they can have so much damage because they have the Pride buff, and they also have the Bloodlust being popped as well, so General Cal is going to be dying any second for PIME now. Ryzen going down too.
Perplexed this was such a bold pull by them. They tried to make this happen, but PIME are going to take the win here as they have gone into this boss with all of their cooldowns as Perplexed are wiping and PIME have killed General Call and stamped their ticket to the Cup Finals.
Oh my goodness there. PIME taking the victory on PI Day, of course. On High Day, of course.
Jeez.
We are going to be moving on. I was waiting for it, all right. I was waiting for it. They take that victory at Sanguine with a flawless 0-death run, moving on to the finals there and absolutely stomping the competition this weekend. They've been so strong and very much deserving the position they're in right now here, Zaro.
If we were on a physical desk somewhere, I would have thrown my pen at you for saying that.
Thankfully, you're only a 3-hour drive away.
2.5 if I go quickly.
Yeah, that's true.
No, speeding is not good, kids. Yeah, but the thing as well to mention here, not only was it a ridiculous run, look at the time. It was a minute 30 faster than the fastest run we've seen all weekend. Obey Alliance with a 2030, we thought that was good. But just the cleanliness and execution coming out from PIME in this dungeon really shows that this is one of those dungeons that they are just incredibly confident on. And now that they've punched their ticket to the grand finals, any team that has a chance of being in the grand finals has to look at the map series that we have coming up in that grand finals and be like, oh wait, Sanguine Depths is one of those dungeons that you're just guaranteed to play. That's almost a free win for PIME if they're able to pull their strategy off. PIME has put themselves in a position where, you know, they're looking like the favorite for the cup now.